Now, one thing that people do, we have 15,000 employees, and a lot of times people assume that our employees come from certain places and had certain opportunities. But I gotta tell you, our 15,000 employees took 15,000 different paths to their job. And whether you believe this or not, some of the paths are very similar to the paths you've took. And so there's no better way to end this than someone who's walked a path, stomped the path, and dominated the path. Deputy Eason.
Outstanding. I want to share a story with you, a story that's very near and dear to me. Now, this story just isn't any old story. This story happens to be your story. No, wait. Let me rephrase that, please. This story is our story. How many of you are familiar with North Philadelphia, or as we would say, North Philly, by a show of hands? North Philly in the house. North Philadelphia, North Philly. For those of you who don't know, North Philadelphia is roughly 15 to 18 miles from this facility. Inner city traffic would take you a half an hour to drive there. I was raised by a single parent in North Philadelphia. Now, let me be clear. I said I was raised by a single parent. However, I was not born of wedlock. You see, my father passed away just prior to my birth. My early childhood years were extremely traumatic. The years I'm referring to are those with kindergarten through the 4th grade. Now, some of you, I don't take this personal, some of you were and are bullies. Some of you, on the other hand, were bullied like me. Instead of awaking each day to go to school during that early childhood period and concentrating on learning the alphabet, my times tables, or simply social studies, my focus almost daily was on these 3 things. 1, would I have my lunch money taken from me? 2, would my book bag be taken, dislodged from my back, and its contents to litter the streets for me to have to kneel down and pick up, embarrassingly? And then thirdly, would I get beat up again? This bullying, or being bullied, continued for years. And it had this effect on me. I developed, at the time, a speech impediment. I began to stutter. Next came self-esteem. Mine, 0. As a matter of fact, if I were at that time to have engaged with you in conversation, I could be seen with my head lowered, never making eye contact, slurring my words, slightly mumbling. But then came this last piece. This last piece, this was the worst. My nerves became so bad as a result of my being a victim of the bullying that I began to pull my own hair out. My mother had had enough. My mother began seeking a means to resolve this trauma, this lifestyle that I was leading. She wanted her son safe, and she wanted her son to receive an education and live a normal life. So my mother began soliciting the opinions of family, friends, coworkers, asking what options might be available for her child to be safe, to be educated. Then she decided, or came to this conclusion. She said, okay, I'm going to send my son away to a boarding school. Yeah, I'll send him away to a boarding school. Now, I'm not able to read minds, but I'm going to bet some of you, when I say the words boarding school, relate to boarding school for the privileged. No, this wasn't the type of school that my mother was looking to enroll her son in. The type of school or boarding school she was looking into was one for the disadvantaged children. Among those schools, the short list of schools she had was the Scotland School for Veteran Boys. Then there was the Valley Forge Military Academy. But ultimately, the school that we selected was the Milton Hershey School. How many of you know who Milton S. Hershey is? Yes. For those of you who don't know, Milton S. Hershey is the chocolate guy. He's the Hershey Kiss, the Mr. Goodbar, the Rolo, the Hershey with almonds, Hershey PA. That's Milton S. Hershey. So you see, Milton S. Hershey and his wife, Fanny, were unable to have children. They couldn't have children of their own. So they, in turn, opted to start a school for disadvantaged children. Now, they had plenty of wealth. They could have done a lot of other things. You know, as I think back on it, Milton S. Hershey was somewhat of a visionary. Somehow or another, way back when, you see, the school was established and opened in 1909. You see, way back when, or that back then, he realized that the disadvantaged children, those children lacking the resources to succeed, most likely would not succeed. Better yet, think of it like this. Milton S. Hershey was doing pre-entry before re-entry was even popular. My mother enrolled me in Milton Hershey School at the tender age of 10. This was back in the summer of 1975. I can still remember it. What I wore, my little afro, Chuck Taylors, little fold-up pick in my back pocket. Yeah, I had hair then. I embraced this environment that my mother had introduced me to with the help of Milton Hershey. Manicured lawns, clean streets, no vandalism on the buildings. And above all, I felt safe. Mom took a lot of criticism. She took a lot of criticism from the neighbors. Some made remarks such as, you know, you're sending your child away to a boarding school? Aren't you able to raise your own child? Don't you love Your son? Why would you send him away to be raised by strangers? Some were not so nice, and they made remarks like this. I get it. You think your son is better than mine. You're sending him away to that white school. Well, Mom stuck with her gut, and I'm glad she did. I graduated from the Milton Hershey School. I attended there 8 years, and once I graduated, I spent a few semesters in college, and then missing the structure, the regimentation of the Milton Hershey School, I enlisted in the armed services. When I came home, I immediately thought that I would be able to fill out applications and I would assume a job with my new employer simply because they would have reviewed my application and saw Milton Hershey School. That didn't happen. Instead, I spent several months with intermittent employment with temp agencies, a few months here, a few months there, until I landed here with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections 26 years ago. You listened earlier to some statistics. One in particular I want to point out. Data tells us that 7 out of every 10 African American males raised in the single-parent home will result in incarceration. Well, as I stand here before you today as a proud employee with the Department of Corrections, I am also the antithesis of that statistic because I, instead of entering as a resident or being here as a resident, I stand before you instead as a custodian. Instead of being led down the path into incarceration or the reentry, I am your Deputy Superintendent for Facilities Management. If I were to leave you with something today, I would say this: we must utilize the resources we have because we cannot do it alone to ensure our children are driven down the path of pre-entry so that they need not experience re-entry. I want to thank Milton S. Hershey. I want to thank my mother, Agnes Eason. I want to thank her for the bravery and sticking with her gut. I want to thank all of you for your attention during this program. I am Kenneth Eason, proud alumni of the Milton S. Hershey School, class of 1983. Go Spartans!